Hello again. Today we're going to be doing a brake bleed and flush. The service should be done every 2 to 3 years or 45,000 miles. What I've come to do is test the brake fluid with a cheap brake fluid tester. It tests the amount of water in the fluid and will tell you when the fluid is going bad. There are actually 4 ways to perform a brake flush. You can do the typical manual way where you press the brake pedal, or you can do a reverse bleed where you push the fluid through the caliper. You can also do a vacuum brake bleed that pulls the fluid through, or you can do a pressure bleeder which pushes the fluid from the reservoir with a pressurized canister. Today we will use a pressure bleeder and do it the pressurized way since you don't need an assistant and it's somewhat faster. Alright, so here's what you'll need. You'll need a pressure bleeder. This can be used for multiple vehicles. You'll need a brake fluid catch bottle. These are pretty cheap. A thin baster would be nice to remove the fluid in the reservoir, but I'm going to use an oil extractor since I don't have one. 2 liters of .4 low viscosity brake fluid, and it needs to meet ISO 4925 Class 6. I'm using this liquid moly brake fluid since I recently used it on my Jaguar. You'll also need a 7/16 or 11mm wrench to loosen the bleeder screw. Either one will work. Alright, now let's get started. The brake fluid reservoir is located under a plastic cover similar to the battery. Once the cover is removed, you'll see the lid to the reservoir. Just unscrew the lid, and then you'll need to unplug this level monitor. It's just a floater similar to the coolant reservoir monitor, and then put this aside. Next we can test the brake fluid using I think it's like a $13 tester. It's pretty cheap, and you just stick the 2 prongs in and it'll tell you if you're ready for a brake fluid change, and mine definitely is. It's over 4% water, so that's not good. Time for a flush. So now whip out your baster or a fluid transfer pump of some type and remove as much brake fluid from the reservoir as you can. This will just make flushing out the brake fluid easier, so you don't have to run through a bunch of old fluid before you get the new fluid. Once you've removed as much as you can, replace the fluid in the reservoir with your new fluid. Here you can see the specialty liquid moly SL6 fluid that I'll be using. Now we can set up the power bleeder. What you'll need to do is put about 1 liter of the brake fluid inside of the power bleeder container. This way, when the pressure bleeder is bleeding, it's pushing the fluid through the hose, and so you never really need to refill the reservoir as long as you put enough brake fluid in this bleeder. As long as the system is airtight, you should be able to pump the power bleeder up to about 15 psi. And you should note some brake fluid going through the tube. Just keep an eye on it for a little bit and make sure that it's not having any catastrophic leaks. If it leaks 1 psi every 10 minutes or so, it's not a big deal. You can just come around and pump it up after each wheel if you want. Now that the brake system is pressurized, you can start bleeding the old fluid out through the lines. The order of wheels that you go through does matter, so you should start on the wheel that is the furthest away from the brake fluid reservoir. And so this is a left-hand drive car, and so the furthest would be the right side or passenger side rear. On the rear end you can see that there's a brake sensor, and you can just move this out of the way. I actually tied it closed because I didn't really want to install a new sensor after my brakes, and I inspect my brakes all the time, so it's not really necessary. But here you can see the bleeder screw. And what you want to do is you want to attach the collection bottle onto the bleeder like so. And then it's just a matter of finding somewhere magnetic to hang it so that the fluid has to go up. You'd want the fluid to go up so that there's no air bubbles that can get back into the system. And so just place it wherever. And once you find a good spot, now you can open the bleeder. You just have to open it enough to see fluid coming out. Once you see fluid, you can stop, or you can open it a little bit more if you want it to come out a little bit faster. But you can see it rising up so that there shouldn't be any air accumulating, and it empties into the bottle. I'm going to turn the bottle lid a slight bit just so it doesn't come out the hole on the top. Now the trick here is you're supposed to be watching the line and waiting for it to change color. The problem is the old fluid is like a amber color and then the new fluid is like a light amber, and so it's kind of difficult to tell. What I've come up with to tell when you're done, well, first you can, if you think your brain is telling you that the fluid is changing color, you can test it using the brake fluid tester itself. Just get a little bit of fluid in the cap and test that fluid, and if it's clean, then you know you're done. So take the cap off and hold it like so, just so that the fluid accumulates in the lid, and then take your tester and test that fluid. And here you can see it's 0% water, so this is probably the new fluid. And I would say that we're done with this wheel. Once you're done, just tighten down the bleeder screw to 7 foot-pounds, or just somewhat tight. After each wheel, you should go back to the pressure bleeder and make sure that it's around 15 psi. You'll lose a little bit of pressure after you bleed some of the fluid, so just bring it back up. After doing the other back wheel, you'll have to do the passenger front wheel and then the driver front wheel. And once you do all 4, then you're done. The last thing you need to do is just disconnect the pressure bleeder, and so you can remove the pressure by unscrewing the pressure bleeder cap, and you'll get some air rush. Due to the loss of pressure, the extra fluid from the reservoir will actually flow back to the bleeder, so it makes a little bit less of a mess. Once that's done, you can just unscrew it from the reservoir and baster out any excess as long as you get to the max level on the reservoir, and then put the cap back on and you're done. And that's basically it for this maintenance item. If you have any questions, please leave a comment. I make Range Rover Sport and Jaguar videos as issues pop up, so don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any simple fixes that will likely save you thousands over taking it to a dealer. Thank you and have a good one.